Hello and welcome. I'm Vijay Srinivas, and this is the Federal Special Panel as Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman is all set to deliver her record 9 straight budget. With India expected to end FY26 with growth of about 7.3% and retail inflation well below RBI's tolerance band of about 2%, the country's economy, at least on the face of it, appears to be doing pretty well. But these strong headline numbers conceal deeper structural challenges as well. We are now joined by an expert panel who will now be decoding the hits and misses of Modinomics and what more needs to be done in this budget season. Before we dive into the conversation, I would like to introduce our guests, Mr. Ampa Palniappan, President Ampa Group and Vice President of South Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Thank you very much, sir. Mr. T.K. Arun, leading columnist and economist, who also writes often on the Federal as well. Thank you very much, sir. Ms. Vidya Mahambari, Professor of Economics at Great Lakes Institute of Management. Thank you very much, ma'am. And Mr. S. Srinivasan, Editor-in-Chief of the Federal, and Mr. Prasanna Mohanty, Business Editor of the Federal as well. Thank you very much, people. Let me first begin with, TK Arun, sir. The budget 2025, had close to, the Union government had to forego about 1 lakh crore because of the tax cut, the direct tax cut that Nirmala Sitharaman had proposed, which is an attempt to spur consumption in the economy, which is the biggest driver of the India's GDP, with over 60%, the annual economic survey had pointed out yesterday. But if you really look at the consumption numbers, well, I think it is certainly been below the GDP growth. So does this suggest that tax cuts alone cannot revive demand, and the economy needs something just beyond tax cuts?
Absolutely. And this was anticipated by people like me. The elasticity of demand, the demand elasticity of growth is actually just about 1.2 or so in India. This is an estimate by the National Institute of Public Finance and Policy. So to expect that by giving some tax cuts, you'll be able to stimulate growth without reviving stalled investment was just a mindless hope. So that has not been realized. So I think what this budget needs to realize is that despite the seemingly high growth numbers that have been churned out recently, the economy is still in a bad shape. The investment as a proportion of GDP, that is gross fixed capital formation as a proportion of GDP, has been stuck below 30% since 2014. Only in 1 year, in 2022-23, did it cross 30 to become 31.2. Whereas we need this to be at least 35% of GDP for growth to sustain in the medium term. And this is a key to boosting growth, stimulating investment and not just stimulating demand. Demand will follow. Investment is the leading sector of the economy. And private sector capacity utilization has been again stuck below 75% for many years. If your capacity utilization is below 75%, why should private industry invest in adding capacity? They will not. So the only area where the private sector can actually invest is in the infrastructure. Now, in the last budget, the government said that they will announce a public-private policy for investment in infrastructure. But that announcement wasn't followed by any policy creation or policy articulation. So this is a prime responsibility of the budget to announce PPP schemes separately for separate sectors of the infrastructure. Second, it would be wrong for the government to consider very severe fiscal correction in this budget. The overall size of the budget is not something that many people pay attention to. But I think the budget should be at least 15% of GDP. I mean, that is low by global standards. The size of the government in India is constrained by the ability to mobilize taxes. For the center and the states combined, we collect around 17% of GDP as tax. Then we have some 2-3% of non-tax revenue, and we borrow another 7-8%. And that is the total ability of the center and the states combined to spend. Now, the states actually outspend the center, but the center should at least try to stimulate the growth process by spending collectively at least 15% of GDP, revenue and capital expenditure combined. Within that, it can try to increase capital expenditure. So this is my basic minimum expectation from the budget.
Let me bring in Srinivasan sir here. So, we had the GST cuts as well. The Prime Minister called it a Diwali bonanza, but even that hasn't had a profound impact to sort of kindle consumption. Even though we did see SUV sort of being sold at large. Lots of in the rural consumption has gone up, but the broad based output hasn't really come in. How do you look at that?
Yeah, like TK pointed out before me, I mean, these are all very well known problems. But you see, it's not just GST, they're also cut, what they call as sin goods. Some of the taxes were raised there. So,
That's
but
right.
what is happening currently is both the revenues are not picking up. That's one problem. That the way they expected that the revenue would pick up, the tax base will increase, and there'll be further revenue, and also consumption will pick up. None of that has happened to the levels which they estimated. But the overall, the economy, the survey, what came out economic survey yesterday is extremely optimistic. It says that we have crossed the, Goldilocks or 7%
That's right. Yeah.
threshold, which is required. In fact, we require
No
much
inflation
higher,
hike.
8 to 10% to become what they call as Viksit Bharat, or at least to become a decent middle income country. But all these expectations are all, a very rosy picture, but in reality, it's not happening. I think one of the essential thing here is the capital spending, which again they said they've done, the infrastructure push, moving away from spending on public sector. They attempted that also, and last year it was about 3.1% of GDP spending on infrastructure. Again, this time again they may spend more. But the real issue, it is turning out to be none of these measures are actually yielding results on the ground. I think that's an essential thing. Basically, it is all coming down to how they're able to implement these issues. That's what I would say.
Professor Vidya Mahamri, your take on this?
Yeah, on the consumption side, if we go by all the experience that we have, people respond to when they increase consumption. When they think their permanent income rises, that is when they increase their consumption. When we give tax cuts, that is just one-off measure. It just happens once time. So people tend to save. If we go back to 2007-8 crisis, different countries gave stimulus in different fashion. Countries such as US did give one-time tax rebates. Not even one-fifth of that went into consumption, because rationally people save that money if they are not sure about their wage growth, if they are insecure about their income stability. What happened that time in India? It so happened that same time six pay commission got implemented. Right? So when you got six pay commission implemented, happened to have at that time, people's permanent income rises, and public sector still accounts for quite a bit of formal sector employment in India. So when their permanent income rises, permanently salaries are increasing, and I'm not at all suggesting we should increase, in that manner. But I'm just saying, unless there is, some indication that incomes are going to increase, people will save one of, boost that they get due to the tax cut. Secondly, how many proportion of households really paid income tax in India, direct income tax, right? So that means for majority of the people, these direct income tax cuts do not make any difference, because a lot of employment is still in the informal sector, right? So that's where the marginal propensity to consume is much higher. For relatively rich, marginal propensity to consume is not high. Most of their needs are already met, so they will do little bit of discretionary spending extra. But otherwise, it is the income levels and income stability, wage growth, in real wage growth, not nominal wage growth. Real wage growth is almost not increased at all, real wages in some time. So without this, significant increase in real consumption growth is always going to be difficult.
That's right. Okay, so I wanted to focus on the point that TK Arun sir made. It's about that this has been a pain point of the economy for a pretty long time. The private investment is not coming in. The capacity utilization is somewhere in the mid 70s. I want to take this question to Mr. Ampa Parniyappan. So the 2019 corporate tax cut, the subsequent the production linked incentive kind of schemes and all that. These are meant to trigger a private investment cycle, but instead corporate profits have surged. In fact, the economic survey also pointed out that the corporate is sitting on a pile of cash. Why has India Inc. failed to respond to tax cuts and subsidies with higher investment? When will they even do that?
Thank you very much for having me on the program. See, I would like to take the optimism in the economic survey further, because I think 7.3% for 2026, and I think as Mr. Srinivasan said, we have to be higher than that, between 8 and 10, to reach the Viksit Bharat target. So I think see, we have to give time to the economy. I don't think there's any instant medicine, according to me, from the business point of view. I think we have to work on a 5-year horizon. I think the first horizon can be 2030, and the next can be a 10-year horizon, 2035, and then the 2047 horizon. So I think, looking at sustaining this over a period of first 5 years from now and then thereafter, I think is what I would like to have, a medium-term view and then a long-term view. Right? So to use the PLI scheme and all of the other incentives that we have got, the personal income tax being changed, so that thereby spurring a higher savings rate. So all that is going to take time to trickle down to the I think I will start with borrowing rates. So I think first the borrowing rates will have to come down some more. It's come down a couple of times by 0.25, but 25 basis points twice. I expect more cuts happening there over the next year or so, right? So that's going to, I think, first give us a trigger. I think the EU FTA deal, and where we are going to get cheaper imports of machineries from Europe, right? Which is again going to be a good trigger point for us to take it forward in terms of investments into machinery. I think the US machinery, the European machinery has always been a great way ahead than other machinery suppliers. I think the German technology, or whatever, whichever technology we talk of, is much more sturdier and stronger than other technologies which we have. So I think the EU FTA deal, when it comes in like 6 months to a year from now, so I think that's going to give us another trigger point in terms of increasing investment. Right? So ease of doing business again is something which I think the government will have to increase the concentration, or the the thought process on ease of doing business. I think that's another area which will help in this. So I stay bullish in terms of this, but I will give it the time. I'll give it the horizon of 5 years for the first 5 years, and then thereafter. That's where I stand.
All right, so let me bring in the Federal Business Editor, Mr. Prasanna Mohanty, who's also written a piece, a very sharp piece on this. He's talked about Nirmala Sitharaman when she said, the Hanuman is not flying. So Mr. Mohanty, would you agree with what Mr. Ampapaliyappan is saying? Maybe we should give it some time. In a couple of years, maybe a private investment will kick in. And we've just signed about the EU-India FTA right now.
If you look at RBI and Finance Ministry's monthly bulletins, they have been saying this for 10 years, and it has still not revived. It still remains low and below par. So to wait for another 5 years, 10 years doesn't make any sense, because unless the ground reality is changed, like TK pointed out about capacity utilization, it remains at 75. I mean, that is on the higher side. For most part of the decade, it is below that. And we had good investment when it was about 80% or more. That was around FY 10, 11, 9. That was the period. So the other thing is, apart from capacity utilization, which reflects poor consumption demand, you also need to have that part in mind, that why this capacity utilization remains low. Because consumption demand is low. Why is consumption demand low? Because income levels are low. One of the speakers said real wage growth is was 0.5% in FY27. This is SBI research report. And before that, it was negative for the previous 3-4 years. So you don't have wage growth. Quality jobs are not growing. Income levels are not going up. So unless income levels go up, consumption will not revive, investment will not revive. And there are policy issues because of which good quality jobs are getting lower and lower. It already is about 10%, and now you have a fixed term employment in the new labor code, which is going to particularly kill permanent good jobs, because it's a like to like thing, but without any tenure secure. It can be for a 1 week, like it is in Spain and in some other European countries. But and it can be for say 3 months, like in Delhi University professors. They're all on ad hoc, and their contract gets renewed every 3 years without increment, without promotion, without social security changes. So all these things need to change for private capex investment to happen. And if you look at past couple of months, you had CMI report saying that for 3 consecutive quarters, private capex pulled out 14.5 lakh crore. That was in September quarter, and it crossed the pre-pandemic FY19 level. Then you had another report saying that foreign companies pulled out 2 lakh crore of investment. So why are they pulling out investment? I mean, they have these are the investments which have been cleared by banks. I mean, loans have been sanctioned. These are institutionally approved. So what does it mean if you are pulling it out for say 4 quarters, 1 year? It means, and at the same time, your investment abroad by the Indian Inc. OFDI is rising. It's gradually rising. So, which means that India Inc. doesn't have faith in our growth momentum keeping up, or even in the current growth rate that we show. So it reflects they have no faith, and there is no need because of low consumption demand and consequently capacity utilization. So I don't think uh, it would be fair to put all the burden on private capex without putting your house in order. That is
Okay.
income level, raising
I think,
income level.
I think Vidya Mahamari wants to comment. Ma'am, please.
Yeah, so I just want to add, means in addition to domestic consumption, which I agree with all the points that have been made, uh, private players essentially invest for the expected future return. And expected future returns are going to depend on, as has been already said, either on the domestic demand or on the export demand. Now, economic survey itself is saying the best case scenario for this year is as business as usual in 2025, which wasn't great. The second scenario it is putting out is more protectionism, and third scenario is there is a tail risk of very severe shock because of the extreme investments in AI and so on. So if you see all the scenarios on the global side that have been panned out, uncertainty is simply rising. So when the uncertainty is rising on the global side, even though notwithstanding the EU and the deal which has happened, nonetheless there is huge level of uncertainty on the global side. And on the domestic side, the domestic consumption is household consumption is not rising. So it seems perfectly rational right now for the private businesses to hold on and see what's likely to happen, because once the large investments are made, they are irreversible. Large part of it is irreversible, especially manufacturing. So, anyone who's going to put up huge investment, it makes sense to, wait and see what's likely to happen. So cash rich in the sense there is a, trade-off here. So it is better to, wait with that cash in hand till some certainty pans out.
Yeah, I mean, as we talk about uncertainty, I think it wouldn't be right to not to name the elephant in the room, Donald Trump here, the flavor of the season. So I think as we talk about the EU FTA trade deal as well, the renewed tariff actions by the United States under President Trump, have disrupted global trade flows, not just in India, and India is also like sort of rethinking tariffs and FTA after years of protectionist policies as well. So how should Budget 2026 position India in this particular fractured trade order? Can I, bring in Srinivasan sir here?
Look, I think before going into trade, I do agree that trade has become a big issue. But then before going to that, let's look at some of these issues again, and let's others also throw weight in what they feel like. One issue is that what are you going to do with the tinkering of the tax which they did last year? They brought in the new tax regime, kept aside the old tax regime. The entire effort was done thinking that, because this is important, because most middle class people will be keenly watching this budget from a tax angle. That's what the general population does. Now, what are they going to do it? Are they, because the new tax regime, which actually has done away with most of the exemptions, which has resulted in the savings also reducing, and expectation was that money will go into stock market, which has happened in a way. Mutual funds are actually doing very well, but again, it has not resulted in anything worthwhile. So are they going to continue with this? Because the old tax regime, they're more or less, they're saying that we are not going to continue, but they haven't ended it as well. But so what is going to be really on the tax front? Because personal income tax is what most people look for in the budget. I mean, that's the first thing they look for. Is there anybody who wants to say something on this, that what is it they're going to do on this? Because the GST, on the other hand, they have rationalized. And in fact, it has helped in a way the center also, because this is the last year they'll be also ending the GST compensation fee. So they'll be saving some money there. That's all they're getting from that. But overall, despite doing this, again, the other issue which concerns people largely is inflation. Inflation is down at 1.8%, but perhaps the problem here is the cost of living more than inflation. The other issue is that it is affecting farmers, because I think almost all the prices in the market are actually below MSP of most item, because the inflation is down. So I would like some of the our colleagues to answer these questions. I think these are the things which they need to address in the budget.
I don't think the government can actually withdraw some of the exemptions it made last year. We'll have to go forward building on that. Now, the largest chunk of tax that the government collects is actually personal income tax. It is bigger than corporate tax. It is bigger than, I mean, of course, GST is a separate segment. I am saying among the taxes collected by the center, personal income tax is the largest segment. And the only way it can grow is for one, to increase compliance, and two, for the economy to grow, the incomes to grow. Now, I wouldn't complain about particular exemptions being removed, because what really happens when you offer an exemption is to shuffle your savings into particular portfolios, not really to increase overall savings. Overall savings also reflect the investment activity in the economy. Ultimately, investment must equal savings, right? So if you step up investment, then savings are automatically increased to match that investment. So the basic task is to stimulate investment and not try to stimulate savings via tax cuts. That will not help. And if I could address the question that Vijay raised, the geopolitical situation now, it is not that Trump just turned the world of trade upside down by ending MFN system, attacking the MFN tariff regime, and sidelining the World Trade Organization. He has also destroyed the security architecture of the world that he inherited. There is no longer a US anchored world trade, business, the rules based world order. That has been turned upside down. The security regime in NATO is shattered. Japan and South Korea can no longer be certain that the US will come to the aid in case there is any problem in the neighborhood. And except for Israel, no country in the Middle East can take US assistance for granted. That is why Saudi Arabia signed a pact with Pakistan. Now, in this kind of a situation, India cannot rely on the US as a stable partner to support Indian defense requirements in case we have any problems with our northern neighbor, who is a very powerful country, the second most powerful army and navy, air force, missile force in the world. Which means that India has to gear up for defending strategic autonomy by increasing its outlays on defense, by increasing its outlays on R&D, by increasing its outlays on general preparedness to mobilize material and men in case there is any problem. All of this calls for drastic repurposing of our expenditure so that savings can be generated to allocate funds for these geo-strategic requirements. How do we do that? Now, if you look at the central government's budget, a whole lot of expenditure is actually on areas that rightfully belong to the states. The center started any number of schemes in education, in healthcare, in namely whatever, social welfare, housing, and they'll give part funding and force the states to stop up the rest of the funds and then stamp the prime minister's face on it and declare it a PM Yojana or some scheme or the other. All this money is meant for political leverage and for populist purposes and not according to the division of responsibility between the center and the states according to the constitution. So by refocusing expenditure in areas that are actually the center's responsibility, such as defense, we can make some savings. If you look at our food economy, agriculture economy, we are continuing to give ever rising minimum support prices to grow more grain, and we don't need that grain. Grain is accumulating in the FCI stocks far in excess of buffer stocking norms. In fact, last year we used 5.2 million tons of rice to ferment into ethanol. Can you imagine? We pay massive subsidy on fertilizer, irrigation is cost-free, electricity for farmers is virtually free in most places, and all that input goes into producing grain, which is procured at a fancy price, and then we use it for fermenting into ethanol. This criminal waste that happens in agriculture, ending that, or at least not ending at one stroke, beginning to end that is one way to generate resources, to repurpose fiscal resources for meeting our geostrategic requirements.
Yeah, but there is a TK one aspect here. They've also the economic surveys acknowledge about what is happening to maize, and they are saying it is distorting the food security. So,
Exactly.
like you pointed out in an article earlier, also, like you said about rice, also about this. Is there any possibility, or just pronouncements in pious pronouncement in the survey and will never take shape? Because what is really short right now is oil oil is that's what is required very badly,
Pulses.
and access for protein. So these are two things which are in short. See, there is an excess, nearly, I think, excess of wheat, rice, in maize. I mean, other things are all up, but these two are really down. Will they actually have the political will to do something with this, or it will just be a pious statement?
Yeah, I agree with you. The only way is to dump this ethanol target. Ethanol blending is a completely stupid idea. We are diverting. Maize is what? Essentially, that is chicken feed. If you divert more and more of maize to ethanol, you are starving chickens and increasing the price of chicken feed, and that will increase the price of eggs. It will increase the price of chicken, the primary source of protein. This is all what you are doing with the ethanol blending. And it is, and ethanol blending is okay if you are using only crops which are grown without any subsidized water, subsidized fertilizer, subsidized procurement. That's not the case. So we are doing ourselves great harm with this foolish ethanol blending program. We should abandon it. That's the only solution to the maize problem.
Since we are
Okay.
talking about prices, just one point. Even though inflation is now low and well below the RBI target, it is still in relationship with your nominal wages, which are stagnant. So if your wage is still 100 rupees or 400 rupees, inflation of 2-3% still means, to maintain your life standard, you should at least have more than that. Means, or to have consumption growth, you need much more real wage growth. So when you have real wage growth near zero, low inflation doesn't make any difference at all, because your ability to spend is not rising even with low inflation. So we come back only to the problem of real wages which are stagnant.
Yeah, see, because I was just going to say a couple of things. See, the wage growth being stagnant, I think, is a partly biased statement, because see, we are unable to hire today good talent at a stagnant wage rate. right? At a stagnant salary rate, because good talent is still expensive and it's becoming more rare as we go up, right? And so I think this killing of upskilling of existing talent is I think one of the major areas where I think the central government should focus on. I think so. Upskilling has to be focused. I think talking in terms of because we are willing to pay any amount of money for good talent today, right? So, but the talent is becoming scarce. That's one part of it which I wanted to say. The other part of it was investment, where we talked with investments. I think all lending institutions today are flush with funds, whether it's a private AIF or banks or private banks or whatever. So I think they want to lend to good corporates at this point of time, and corporates are not borrowing as much as the other people have said. So I think so that's something which the Trump is again causing further doubts in people's mind as to what at least the next 2 to 3 years is going to be. Okay, so that's also holding back investments by various corporates, right? So the right balance of that is what we have to work towards too. Talking of defense expenditure, definitely yes, I expect the infrastructure expenditures and the defense expenditure to go up in this budget significantly. I think our reliance on self-reliance on defense is going up with various partnerships. So I expect at least a 40 to 50% increase in defense budget this year than what was in the previous year. So that's something which I expect definitely to go to, and I also expect a good amount of that being portioned off for private investments in India, right? So say that is where in 3 to 4 years time, the export of defense also will be a major area which I see there'll be a great focus on. So these are a few points we wanted to add to what was the other.
TK raised the federal issue. It's basically division of labor between the state and center. It's significant, very, very important. There are two things which are going to perhaps happen. One is the Finance Commission report, FC16. The report has been submitted to the president. It's been given to the government. Probably it has to take some form in this budget. So how it is going to affect this budget, what kind of transfer is going to happen to the states? Will there be any provisions for them? Because already the grants are all, on the downward as far as the states are concerned. So that's one issue. Second is this, I think Prasanna would like to speak on this unconditional cash transfers with which they have hit the states very hard. The reality of it, as you see it, because the consumption in some of the states, at least in Bihar, more than 50-60% comes out of these direct transfers. That's what the cash is in hand. And the economic survey itself expresses worry and says that it's actually reduced women labor participation too. So I mean, it's not that states are only, majority of states are with the central government. There are only a few opposition ruled state governments. So do you think, you have written about it, but Prasanna, do you think that there will be something which we can see in the budget?
The irony is economic survey officials or finance ministry officials who write economic survey, they know very well that this unconditional cash transfer was pioneered by the center. They are silent on this. It started with PM Kisan. Secondly, it has continued ever since then with the center anchoring and leading these unconditional cash transfers in most of these states. The latest example, as you mentioned, is Bihar. Now, this 10,000 rupees given to a woman, one woman in a family, was started by Prime Minister himself. the burden goes to the state. Now, economic survey turns around and says this is unconditional transfer by state government. That is not the case. As you rightly pointed out, most of these states are ruled by the same political party that holds power at the center. In Maharashtra, in Haryana, in Madhya Pradesh, in Chhattisgarh, in Rajasthan, all these unconditional cash transfers it comes with Modi's guarantee at election time. And Modi himself takes to public rallies and declares that. So to blame states is absolutely untenable. Secondly, yes, they have this problem of, like economic services, committed expenditure is about 62% of their total revenue. Now, that is because almost entire taxing power or power to generate resources is with the center. All direct taxes with the center, and most indirect taxes, except on petroleum products and alcohol for human consumption, are with the states. The rest are submerged in GST. So states have very little power to raise resources for their own expenditure. Now, coming back to your first point about new tax regime. Now, the new tax regime without exemptions and incentives began with the corporate tax in 2019. And later, the same thing happened for personal income tax. Now, we announced a big relief in income tax in the last budget, but look at the impact. From April to December, growth in direct taxes, that is corporate tax, mainly corporate tax and personal income tax. There are other smaller elements. Has fallen down. The growth in direct tax collection has fallen down to 4% from 16% in the corresponding previous fiscal. This is one point to flag, which means that your new tax regime is not resulting in higher collection growth. The second part is this corporate tax. Now, if you look at 10 previous budget documents, maximum effective tax is on companies with a declared profit of 0 to 1 crore. I'm talking about the FY23, for up to which the last year's budget gave the. In this case, from 0 to 1 crore profit making PBT, companies were paying effective tax rate of 19%. It progressively falls down, effective tax rate, and when it comes to over 500 crore of PBT, it is 19%. And what does budget document explain why this anomaly? It says the larger profit-making companies are probably taking advantage of the exemptions and incentives, which explains lower effective tax rate. But that also points out to the failure of the new tax regime in which taxes were lowered on the condition of no exemptions and no incentives. So how is that 6 years later you have corporates taking those advantage of those incentives and exemptions and paying lower tax? And at least for 10 years, I can tell you that is the case. So which means that tax regime is not benefiting. Tax base has increased a little, but I did a quick calculation and saw, say in personal tax, it's only about 1.6% of the population which actually pays tax. Overall, it is about 3 to 4%, but most of them are zero filers. So this tax regime is not working. It's obvious from budget documents, economic survey data.
I want to bring in TK Arun as well here, and this, this is something about the fiscal consolidation. The government has been sticking to its last year's fiscal deficit target of about 4.4%, sticking to the fiscal glide path. During the pandemic, it was about 9% there. So, but where should budget 2026 draw the line? Should it continue to focus on fiscal consolidation or ease a bit to create headroom for growth?
We should allow growth to achieve fiscal consolidation rather than cutting the budget numbers right now. Our primary deficit is right now down to 1% of GDP. So that's okay. We needn't shrink it any further. Our goal should be to let the economy grow. And for that, the size of the budget, overall budget, should be increased to at least 50% of GDP. And for that, if you need to incur some additional borrowing, it's okay. That borrowing will be more than serviced by faster growth if the money is used to incentivize investment. For that, I said, the only place the private sector can actually invest is in infrastructure, not in their own capacity. And for that, you need to create the policy framework which will allow the private sector to invest in infrastructure. You see, every year, I mean, the demand for office space in big cities is going up. Rentals are going up. That's the only thing that is going up. And that is driven by global capacity centers and the demand for quality office space. So we need more towns. We need more towns where cheaper office space can be built, and nobody is building them. No, all the funds allocated for building new towns is going unutilized. There needs to be careful planning on zoning and freeing up land with the help of farmers to ensure that we have new urban spaces being built. Without that, the economy cannot grow. And just looking at tax rates will not actually help.
All right. Srinivas, would you like to add something on the fiscal deficit front?
Yeah, I think they have been doing fiscal consolidation for last 5 or 6 years, and they've brought down to around 4 point. This time, I think the target is around, I think 4.1.
Yeah.
So the really question is that do they need to do more, or they need to ease a bit and raise funds, because the debt this payment is also going to balloon a bit, because a lot of bond payments are all due this year. So the bulk payment is also there, and so they have to do that. I think they can globally, if you see that they have actually pretty much more debt is being used, I think they can relax a bit, and they have very good forex reserves also, which is basically 1 year's, which is actually more than what is required. I think they can take this call. Maybe they can go easy on this. The inflation is also good, so I think they can do that.
Okay. I also wanted to bring in
Just
Mr.
slightly contrary view, I totally agree in terms of we needing more investment in infrastructure, especially on the urban side. Totally with that, but I'm not sure we should relax on fiscal consolidation. It is just the composition of government spending that needs to be, they have changed it somewhat, but it needs to be much more in favor of capital expenditure than revenue expenditure, rather than just increasing the fiscal deficit to GDP per se. So it's more perhaps about how they increase capex in infrastructure, and as rightly pointed out, how they incentivize private sector to take stake in that.
All right. Okay. Point taken, ma'am.
I will add one point here.
Yeah, sure.
After this pandemic, changes in the way fiscal policy was handled and borrowings happened, etc., IMF carried out a study, global study of, I don't exactly remember, but it was about 100 countries or something. And they found that countries deviating from this FRBM norm, or what this norm is set by IMF, 60% of GDP for debt and 3% for
3%,
fiscal deficit. Yeah. So they found the countries were not only spending far, going beyond those limits, those who are doing that are actually doing better. So IMF about 2 years back advised all countries to relook at those limits. There is nothing sacrosanct about 3% fiscal deficit or 60% of debt. But the point that TK was making was perfectly sound. Stiglitz, the Nobel laureate Joseph Stiglitz, said that after the pandemic, that you need to spend more, if need, by borrowing, so that growth happens, and then you get higher revenue, uh, financial resources to invest rather than go for fiscal austerity, which would be very foolish and counterproductive. So that view, even IMF has changed its own views, and it is not as sanctimonious about 60% and 3% limits.
Yeah. All right, sir.
I,
You
I
know,
also
India
agree.
can, India should,
Yeah, I also agree that I don't expect the budget to go for the 4.1%. Maybe they will look at somewhere in between the 4.4 and 4.1%. I think the investment focus will definitely call for that.
okay. Okay. Mr. Ampa, I also wanted to, focus a little bit on the artificial intelligence. The economic survey also had a separate chapter on that. So if you really look at India's five largest IT companies, the TCS and the Wipro of the world, which for decades created tens of thousands of jobs, every single quarter. If you look at the results, earnings results, you get to see that, added just about a net total of about just 17 employees in the last 9 months, which is from March to December 2025. There's been a hiring freeze across the software sector right now, which is in a way sort of underscoring that there's been a disruption because of AI. You see AI creating ripples across the labor markets right now. How do you expect the budget to address these concerns?
See, I definitely agree that the ripples in the labor market caused by AI is a cause of concern. But I feel ultimately it will balance out. Again, as I say, time is an essence. So, see, to use the AI properly, you need to have skilled talent force, because AI is not going to work by itself. It's going to support you to deliver whatever you have to deliver in business, or in industry, or wherever you put your AI in. So in terms of disruption, yes, there will be disruption, but it will even out as we go. One, and on the budget focus, definitely the budget is going to give more incentive for adoption of AI, is what I think. In the manufacturing sector, more than the non-manufacturing sector. So I definitely see AI focus on the budget in agri-tech. In agri-tech, I think the data which AI is going to provide us will be very useful in improving our efficiency in agriculture. The agriculture efficiency in India is not very high. So the increasing the efficiency in agriculture, water management, and all such things, I think AI will be useful. And I see one of the major areas after manufacturing will be agri, and the AI use in agri and manufacturing will definitely be one of the focus areas in the budget.
All right, sir. I want to bring in Srinivasan sir as well, who loves talking about artificial intelligence. Sir, Nirmala Sitharaman had come out with this philosophy of make AI in India, make AI work for India. I think 3 years back. It's been 3 years and we still don't have a foundational model here in India, Chat GPT of sorts. What do you think the message that the budget should actually be talking about as far as AI is concerned? We're already into the AI era. We see companies deploying AI everywhere.
Yeah, I know. So the economic survey is also admitting that, and it's actually advising in a way that let's give up all these, chasing foundational dreams and all. In any case, most people think that we are going to the biggest, largest user case in the world. So actually, the thing is moving more towards adaptation. But there seems to be a bit of confusion there also. On the one hand, they are also, they want to bring in more data centers, but also worried on the other hand that it will take up a lot of water, it will take up a lot of land, and it's going to be counterproductive in that sense. But then also saying on the same hand that no, it's minimalistic as compared to other countries, and we'll have more control over these things. I think the AI policy or the thinking over AI still need to evolve. Because they seem to think that we can't, the dream of actually doing anything big on AI I don't think it's there. It's more about how we implement, save jobs. I think it's more that kind of approach, which is what the budget probably will take.
Yeah, all right. So we have about 10 more minutes for the panel discussion. There, I wanted to focus a bit on the defense front. TK sir had already spoken about it. Sir, if you really look at the last year's numbers, you see that as a percentage of GDP, the defense expenditure has come down, but the cost has certainly gone up. But is India under investing in defense capability, particularly when the neighborhood is not so okay with us, not so friendly with this? And wasting scarce different resources by not building a global competitive defense industrial base. Atmanirbharta still seems to have not reflected in the Indian defense sector. So, should budget 2020 shift decisively toward capital spending, procurement reforms, and, the defense exports instead of thinly spread allocations there? How do you see it?
Yeah, I would actually disagree that we are not doing enough on defense indigenization. This is one of the few areas where actually we have made some progress under this government. Increasingly, we are trying to procure defense equipment, uh, arms, armaments, ammunition, all that from within India. And we are encouraging private industry to come forward to develop these things. The startup ecosystem also is being utilized to supply more and more things for defense. However, what is lacking is an integrated planning approach to how we will do this. Now we have Indian manufacturers of drones, which the army is only too happy to buy. But the drone control units, the key component which controls where the drone will go, how it will be monitored, how it will be controlled, that is still supplied by China. How vulnerable are we to our core parts of the defense system being controlled by China? So, so we need to first indigenize that and then proceed further. So there are these gaps of planning in the entire electronics infrastructure on which defense manufacture, defense equipment, weapons systems depend. That has to be overcome and not just allocating more money. And in fact, the government should be encouraged to procure more and more from Indian companies. What we fail to appreciate is that we have more than 1,800 global capability centers working in India. They're employing Indian talent to do R&D in a very basic fashion and develop products and processes and actual new intellectual property. Why can't the Indian government think of doing this by allowing Indian companies to invest? We invest 0.64% of GDP on R&D. You cannot become a manufacturing superpower. You cannot become a defense self-reliant by investing just small amounts on R&D. You have to step up investment in R&D, and we have to overcome the cultural resistance of the big industry to spending on R&D. Luckily, we have a startup breed who are willing to do hard technology as part of their process. But they need to be funded. So why can't we think of, say, allowing our national pension system or the EPFO to allocate 5% of their corpus? Only those who are willing, the subscribers to these pension retirement savings schemes, if they are willing to allocate 5% of their funds to large venture funds which will invest in hard tech R&D or startups. And that way we can actually overcome some of the R&D deficit and not part of the big companies. We don't have a single company which spends even 10% of GDP of their revenue on R&D. Whereas companies like Huawei, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, the big pharma companies of the West, they can spend more than 20% of their turnover on R&D, employ hundreds of thousands of engineers on R&D. No Indian company does that. At least we can outsource this to the startups, provided we fund them. And I hope the budget will start something like this on these lines.
Yeah, sure. With Professor Vidya Mahamani wants to add something.
Yeah, I think the GCCs were mentioned, and earlier it was mentioned about we have lack of skilled people to work. So I think first thing is when we are talking about AI, we cannot. If the rest of the world is using AI, of course all our companies have to use AI to remain competitive. Given that, we must train our people to use AI on the employees side. If there is not enough training in terms of how to complement AI, the skills will not get upgraded, and then there is a huge skill shortage in actually how to use AI, and what AI can do and what AI cannot do. Like previously, it was what we used to think is, coding is essentially most of the smart people will go into coding. So that will get eliminated, that no longer requires human smartness. But there are some other occupations and some other job profile, which will come up. I think there should be much more focus on that front, how both the employers and also employees or the, workers can make use of AI.
Okay. As we just have about another 3 to 4 minutes there, so we can just have one roundup of thoughts on this, on the Union Budget 2026. What are you expecting? One focus area each one can actually say from Madam Finance Minister. Let's start with Prasanna Mohanty.
Quality jobs, quality jobs, quality jobs. That will solve 90% of your problem.
All right. So, Professor Vidya Mahamri.
No one can disagree. Ultimate objective is increasing quality jobs. But first thing, from the short-term viewpoint, not to return to more blanket protectionism, especially on the intermediate input, because rest of the world doing it. We need to remain competitive. So that and the composition of government spending much more on the capital spending side.
Okay. All right. TK Arun sir.
Yeah. Apart from the things I've said in the past, I would like to say that the budget should actually fund the creation of a foundational model, indigenous foundational model. While it is important to utilize existing AI models by other countries, we also need to have our own model if we are to be truly strategically autonomous. Suppose tomorrow the Trump says no technology company based in the US using US technology will be allowed to sell their AI foundational models to be used in India. What will happen to India? Should we use Chinese models? So let's hope such a situation doesn't arise. But the whole idea of building for strategic autonomy is to guard against that possibility. Therefore, we should build an AI capability, foundational model of our own separately. At the same time, just as the Chinese did, just as even Saudi Arabia is doing, they are able to utilize existing models and create applications for use in industry. And that we should do without a doubt. At the same time, there should be a parallel track of trying to create a foundational model funded by the government. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, Srinivasan sir.
I think first thing is, I mean, we haven't spoken about it. The government should start providing reliable data, because most economists most of the time are raising doubts over what the numbers they've been given. So I think it'd be a good thing if they just start with that they start giving more reliable data. The second thing is, I think the Finance Commission 16 report, I hope that they give more share to the states. And if, whatever share they are giving, they're honest about it. Because once again, funds being taken away in the form of cess or other forms, surcharge and those kind of things. I think there require some more transparency, because at the end of it, most of the development or most of these industries, everything is going to be in the states. So the states certainly need to be empowered. And the third thing I feel is, the MSMEs. They've been waiting for long. I think if their, the funding pipeline is actually, it's plumbed and they get more, I think that will be one good step.
Yeah. And last but not least, Mr. Ampa Palniappan.
Yeah. Thank you, Jay, for putting me last. So, right. So, let's all understand that this is
ended on a very optimistic note, Mr. Ampa. So that's why. That, yeah.
Yes. See, all of us know that this is an election year for this for the government. That you have 5 state elections coming up in the next 3 months. So, you will definitely expect populist measures to suit those 5 states. I don't want to talk about it, but that's what is definitely going to come as point number 1. But I am very optimistic in saying when we talk of the 114 Rafale deal, which is going to come in the next 3 months, which is going to have an indigenous production of the Rafales in 5 years. That's what I think they're going to target on. So I think that's going, as Mr. RK said, that the defense is, I think, area where well entrenched Indianization is already started, and all the startups in the defense is increasing by the day, right? So I see a lot of positive coming from there. I definitely agree that the budget should focus on funding these startups, which are the future, right? So I think these startups, when taken over by larger companies, become the seed technology for them to become a manufacturing hub. So I would end by saying I am optimistic on the whole economy. I'm optimistic saying that we will focus on close to 8% growth next year, at least under 8, if not 8, for next year from 7.4. And the investments, I definitely feel that after the EU FTA and the other expected FTAs over the next 3 months, I think they're expecting 3-4 more FTAs to come up in the next 3 months. So I think after these FTAs, the investments will pick up and negate the negativity, which the West has, the extreme West has shown us. Okay, so I feel that the FTAs of Europe and other Southeast Asian countries which come up will be a positive indicator for us to increase investments. And over the next 3 to 5 years, I'm very positive where we are. I don't know if, like Mr. Srinivasan said, the 8-10% growth, 10% material, but I definitely feel we'll be crossing 8% in the near future. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Thank you. That's a positive way to end this conversation. And with the same positivity, we look forward to the budget. That's also the perks of having the industrialists on the panel. Thank you very much, Ms. Ampa Palniappan, Ms. Vidya Mahambure, Mr. T.K. Arun, and and our in-house, Srinivasan sir and Mr. Prasanna Mohanty. Very, very insightful and no less riveting talking to each one of you. Thank you very much.